The box weighed almost nothing, and that was the first thing that broke my heart. I had carried it out of the lawyer's office pressed against my chest like it might hold something fragile, and only when I reached the parking lot, standing next to my car in the gray Portland drizzle, did I realize how light it really was. A minute or two before me, my sister Diane had walked out through those same glass doors carrying a folder, a ring of keys, and the address of a lawyer of her own. I walked out carrying a cardboard box so light I could have balanced it on the flat of one hand. I did not open it that day, or the day after. I set it on my kitchen table and I let it sit there, the way you set down something when you are not ready to learn the shape of what is inside. It stayed there through 2 dinners I did not eat, and 1 long night I did not sleep. The corners had gone soft with age. A strip of packing tape, yellowed and curling at one end, held the lid down. And across the top, in that slanted print my mother used for grocery lists and telephone messages, and nothing she considered important, was a single word. Rachel. Not for Rachel, not to my daughter. Just my name, the way she used to call it up from the bottom of the stairs when supper was ready. I am 51 years old, and I want to tell you honestly that I sat in that kitchen and cried before I ever touched the tape. Not because of what was in the box. I did not know yet what was in the box. I cried because of what the box seemed to say about where I had always stood in that family, and about what my mother had thought I was worth in the end. Let me back up, because you should understand how I got to that table. My mother, Eleanor Collins, died on a Tuesday in early March, in the same house on Cushman Street where she had raised the 2 of us. It was the house I had spent the last 11 years driving to twice a week, the house where I changed her sheets and filled her prescriptions and sat with her through the long afternoons when the pain medication made her forget which decade she was living in. Diane visited on holidays. Diane sent flowers. And when the will was read, in a small brown office that smelled of old coffee and printer toner, the lawyer looked down through his glasses and told the room, in a voice with no cruelty in it at all, that the house on Cushman Street would go to Diane. To me, my mother had left a box. I remember the sound the room made, which was no sound. I remember Diane's hand going still on the arm of her chair. I remember thinking, very clearly and very calmly, that there had to be a mistake, that any second now the lawyer would turn a page and find my name attached to something that made sense. He did not turn a page. He slid the box across the table toward me, and it scraped the whole way, light as a thing with nothing inside. If you have ever been the one who stayed, the one who showed up, the one who did the quiet, unglamorous work while someone else got the thank you and the reward, then you already know the particular kind of silence I am talking about. It does not shout. It just settles over you and asks you to smile and be gracious about it. And if that feeling lives somewhere in you too, do me a small favor and stay with me here, because you are exactly the person I am telling this to. Give this a like if it finds you, and subscribe if you want to hear how it ends, because it does not end where you think it does. I want to tell you what was inside that box, but first I need you to understand the woman who packed it, and the 2 daughters she left behind, and the 30 years of small moments that made a nearly weightless box feel when I finally lifted the lid, like the heaviest thing anyone had ever handed me. I lifted the lid on a Thursday evening, with the rain finding the same loose spot in the gutter it always found, tapping out its uneven rhythm against the window over the sink. I had put it off for 3 days, and I think I would have put it off longer if a person can only sit across from a thing for so long before the not knowing starts to cost more than the knowing. The tape gave without a fight. Underneath the lid there was no treasure and no trick, just paper, the way I had feared. On top lay a single sheet folded into thirds, and on the outside of it, in my mother's careful slant, was my name again. Rachel. I sat with it in my lap for a while before I opened it, because her handwriting does something to me it will probably always do, The way a voice on an old answering machine can stop you in a doorway years after the person is gone. Rachel, the letter began, if you are reading this, then I am not there to explain it to your face. And that is the coward's way, and I know it. There are things I carried alone for a long time because I thought carrying them was the same as protecting you. I was wrong about a great many things. I hope you will let me be right about this one. That was as far as I let myself read that first night. My hands were shaking, and I have a habit my mother spent my whole childhood trying to break, of biting at the skin along the side of my thumb when I am frightened. She used to reach over without a word and fold her hand over mine until I stopped. I caught myself doing it at the table, and there was no hand to cover mine, and I set the letter down. Underneath it was a photograph. It was the two of us, Diane and me, on the front steps of the house on Cushman Street, in the stiff Sunday clothes our mother put us in for church. Diane must have been 9, which made me 7. She is smiling at the camera the way Diane has always smiled at cameras, chin up, sure of her welcome in the world. I am looking at Diane. Even then, even at 7, in the one photograph I have of us from that whole year, I am not looking at the person taking the picture. I am watching my sister to see how the moment is supposed to go. I want you to understand something about how we grew up, because none of the rest of it makes sense without it, and because I have spent 50 years trying to explain it to people in a way that does not sound like sour grapes. It was never cruel. That is the part that took me longest to make peace with. Nobody in that house was cruel to me. It was quieter than cruelty, and quieter things are harder to point to. Diane was the bright one. I do not say that bitterly, it was simply true. She came into a room, and the room turned toward her. When she laughed, our mother laughed. A real laugh, the kind that surprised its way out of her. Diane got the new winter coat because Diane was growing, and I got Diane's old coat the following year because I was growing into it. And that was thrift, and it was sensible. And it was also, if you looked at it across enough winters, a kind of arithmetic that always came out the same way. I learned early that the way to be loved in our family was to need very little, so I got good at needing very little. I got so good at it that by the time I was grown, nobody thought to ask whether I needed anything at all. There is a memory the photograph pulled up out of me, sharp as if it had been waiting behind it. I was maybe 8. Diane had a recital, piano, and she was nervous, and our mother spent the whole afternoon in the kitchen making Diane's favorite, a lemon cake with the glaze that took forever, humming her off-key hymns and letting Diane lick the spoon. I asked if I could lick the other spoon, and she said, of course, honey, in a way that was kind and completely elsewhere, and she handed me a clean spoon from the drawer. Not the one from the bowl, a clean one, with nothing on it. She did not even notice she had done it. I stood there holding a clean, dry spoon in a warm kitchen that smelled of lemon, and I understood, in the wordless way a child understands weather, that the sweetness in that house was being made for someone else, and that my job was to be glad it existed at all. I am not telling you this so you will feel sorry for that little girl. She turned out all right. I am telling you because 43 years later I was sitting at my own kitchen table with a clean, dry spoon of an inheritance in front of me, my sister 2 towns over with the keys to the house, and the exact same feeling rising up in me that I had at 8. Be glad it exists at all. Do not ask for more. Be gracious. Except this time there was a letter in my mother's hand telling me I had been wrong about all of it, that she had been wrong. And underneath the photograph, when I finally lifted it out, there was a second envelope, thicker than the first, sealed, with 3 words on the front that made no sense to me at all. Open this second. I did not open the second envelope right away, even though it told me to. I have never been good at doing things in the order I am told, and there was something about that small instruction in her handwriting, open this second, that made me want to sit with the first letter a little longer, the way you linger in a doorway with someone you are not ready to say goodbye to. But the house was quiet, and the rain had settled into that steady kind that sounds like the world exhaling, and eventually I slid my thumb under the flap. This one was longer. 3 pages, both sides, her print getting smaller toward the bottom of each sheet the way it always did when she had more to say than she had room for. "I need to tell you about the years you gave me," she wrote, "and I need to tell you that I know exactly what they cost, because I counted them, even when I never once said thank you in a way you could hear." I had to put the pages down on the table for a minute. Here is what those years looked like if you weren't there. My mother got sick the spring I turned 40, and the sickness was the slow kind, the kind that takes a person away from you in pieces over more than a decade. For 11 years, I drove to Cushman Street on Tuesdays and Fridays and most Sundays. I learned the blue plastic pill organizer with the little doors for each day of the week, and I learned which days she would fight me on the yellow pill and which days she would take it if I crushed it into applesauce. I changed sheets. I sat through afternoons when the medication carried her back to 1974, and she asked me where my father was. And I learned to say he was at work, rather than watch her lose him all over again in real time. Diane sent flowers. I want to be fair to my sister, so I will say it plainly. She loved our mother. But Diane loved her from Boston, over the phone, on speaker while she did something else, in bouquets that arrived on the right holidays with cards a florist had written. And nobody ever thought that was strange, because Diane was the one with the big life, and I was the one who was, in the family's arithmetic, simply available. When you are the available one, your time is not counted as a gift. It is counted as the natural order of things. "Do you remember," she wrote, "the winter the furnace died and you came at 11 at night with those little space heaters from your own house because you would not let me be cold? You never mentioned it again. I mentioned it to God every night for a year. I did not know she had noticed. That is the thing I keep circling back to. All those years I had made my peace with being the one who was not seen, and here was proof, in her own hand, that she had seen the whole time. It is a strange grief to be handed the thing you wanted most only after the person who could have said it out loud is gone. But it was the next part of the letter that changed the temperature in the room. Diane came to me 3 winters ago," she wrote, "and I did for her what I have always done, and I did it without telling you, and that was the last wrong I ever did to you. The papers at the bottom of the box will tell you what I could not. I need you to read them not as a daughter who was cheated, but as the only person in this family I could trust to understand what a home is actually worth." And then, near the bottom of the last page, a line that I read 4 times. "The house is not the inheritance, Rachel. The house was never the inheritance. I am sorry it took me my whole life and yours to learn the difference." I set the letter down and looked at the box, which suddenly did not look empty at all. Because here is what I need you to understand about the winter she mentioned. 3 years back, Diane had gone quiet for a stretch, the way she did when something in her big life was cracking. There had been a business, some kind of design firm she had put her name and, I would later learn, a great deal of money into. When it went under the way those things do, all at once and with people owed. At the time, I knew none of the details. I only knew that Diane started calling our mother more, and that our mother started getting a look I recognized from childhood, that soft, anxious pull toward the daughter who needed rescuing, and I told myself it was none of my business. I had spent my whole life telling myself things were none of my business. It was how I stayed gracious. It was how I kept holding the clean, dry spoon and smiling. Under the letters, when I finally reached for it, was a thick fold of documents held together with a paper clip that had rusted a faint orange ring into the top page. Bank letterhead. A word I could see through the fold before I even opened it. a word that turned the whole quiet room a shade colder. Mortgage. And my mother's voice in my head, from the page I had just set down, telling me to read them not as a daughter who was cheated, but as the one person she trusted to understand what a home is actually worth. I unfolded the papers. The documents were not complicated, which is its own kind of cruelty. I had braced myself for legal language I would need a dictionary to climb through, and instead it was all right there in plain type, the way the most important things in a life usually are once someone finally lays them out for you. It was a home equity loan, taken against the house on Cushman Street, dated the second week of February 3 years earlier. My mother's signature was at the bottom, that same slanting hand, steadier than I would have expected for a woman who by then had trouble holding a coffee cup with one hand. The amount made me sit back in my chair. It was not a small sum meant to fix a roof or cover a bad month. It was most of what the house was worth. Clipped behind the loan agreement was a single page from the bank, a statement of the balance as of that winter, and behind that, a photocopy she had made herself, of a cashier's check. I looked at the name on the payee line for a long time. It was not a contractor. It was not a hospital. It was the name of a bank in Boston, and underneath, in my mother's handwriting on the margin of the copy, 4 words that closed a door in my chest. For Diane. Final one. She had mortgaged the house to save my sister's business, or what was left of it. And when that had not been enough, or had come too late, she had done it anyway, because saving Diane was the oldest reflex she had. Older than sense, older than fairness, older maybe than either of us. I sat there and I did the arithmetic. And this time the arithmetic did not come out the way it always had. Because the house that had been read out loud in that brown office as Diane's inheritance, the house I had spent 3 days grieving as the measure of how little I was worth to my own mother, was not worth what any of us had assumed. Whatever Diane had walked out of that office believing she now owned, a bank in Portland owned most of it. My sister had inherited a beautiful old house on Cushman Street and, wrapped invisibly inside it, the debt she herself had made 3 winters before. And I understood, finally, the furnace. I told you earlier about the night it died, how I drove over at 11 with space heaters from my own basement because I would not let my mother sleep cold. I had always assumed she left it broken out of that stubborn thrift of hers, the make-do frugality of a woman who had grown up with nothing and never quite believed the nothing was gone. I used to gently scold her for it. "Mom," I would say, "you don't have to live like this." She would wave me off and put on another sweater. She was not being stubborn. She could not afford to fix the furnace, because every spare dollar she had was going quietly out the door to a bank in Boston to keep my sister's name from being dragged through something worse. She sat in a cold house in her sweaters and let me think she was just being difficult, because the truth would have meant telling me that she had chosen Diane one more time, and I think, at the end, she could not bear for me to hear it out loud. That is the part that undid me. Not the money. I have never much cared about money, which is maybe why my mother trusted me with the truth of it. What undid me was imagining her sitting alone in that cold front room, carrying this by herself for 3 years, choosing to be misunderstood by the one child who showed up, rather than hand me one more piece of evidence that Diane came first. She let me think less of her to protect me from thinking less of my sister. I don't know if that is love or something more complicated than love, but it was the most purely her thing I have ever known her to do. I reached back into the box because the letters had said the papers would tell me what she could not, and I wanted to be sure I had all of it. Underneath the mortgage documents, at the very bottom, flat against the cardboard, was one more thing I had not seen. A slim savings passbook, the old-fashioned kind with a stiff blue cover, the kind the bank stopped handing out decades ago. My name was typed on the inside. Not Diane's. Mine. and beside it, a small sealed envelope. This one unlabeled. No instruction, nothing. Just my mother trusting me to know when to open it. I did not open it yet. I want to be honest with you about why. It was almost midnight, and I had just learned that my grief for the last 3 days had been built on a lie. Or not a lie exactly, but a gap. A thing left unsaid. And I could feel a different feeling rising up underneath the sorrow. Not triumph. I want to be careful, because this is where a person could turn ugly, and I did not want to become ugly in my own mother's story. But somewhere across town, my sister was sleeping in a house she believed was her reward. Believing, I was sure, that she had once again ended up with the larger share. And she did not know. That was the thing that got me up out of the chair. Diane did not know what she had actually inherited, and she did not know what our mother had done to give it to her, and she did not know that the whole time she had been picturing me driving home with a box of worthless paper. Our mother had been handing me the only thing in that house that was still entirely unmortgaged, honestly, ours. I picked up the phone. Then I put it down. This was not a thing you say to a person over a phone at midnight. In the morning, I drove to Cushman Street. Diane's car was already in the driveway when I pulled up, and the sight of it in that spot, the spot our father used to park in, did something small and complicated to me. There was a realtor's card wedged under the door knocker, one of those glossy ones with a smiling face on it, and I understood before I even knocked that my sister was not planning to live in the house on Cushman Street. She was planning to sell it. She had inherited the place our mother spent 50 years in, and she was going to turn it into a check. She opened the door in one of our mother's aprons, which she had clearly just found in a drawer and put on without thinking. And for a second, neither of us said anything, because there is no script for two grown sisters standing in the doorway of the house that just split them further apart than they already were. "Rachel," she said, warm, practiced, the chin coming up. "I was going to call you. Come in, it's freezing." Inside, the house was full of Diane, boxes she had started, drawers pulled open, our mother's things sorted into keep and donate piles on the dining table with a briskness that turned my stomach. She had already found the good silver. She offered me coffee in a tone that made clear she had decided we were going to be civilized about all of this, that the will had been the will, that I had my box and she had her house, and there was no use being sour. I set the folder down on the kitchen counter, on top of the donate pile, and I slid the papers out. "I need you to look at something," I said. I want to tell you that I said it gently, because I had promised myself in the car that I would not do to her what had been done to me, would not stand there and enjoy watching her face fall. It turned out I did not have to work very hard at that. When Diane's eyes found the loan agreement, when they found the date, and then the amount, and then, finally, the little photocopied check with our mother's 4 words in the margin, whatever performance she had planned for that morning simply drained out of her. "How did you—" she started, and then stopped. "She left them to me," I said. "In the box." Diane sat down slowly at the table, moving a pile of our mother's folded scarves out of the way without seeming to see them. For a long moment she did not say anything at all, and I watched a version of my sister I had never once seen come to the surface, the frightened one underneath the bright one, the girl who had spent her whole life being the one everybody rushed to save and had never learned what it costs the people doing the saving. "I was going to pay her back," she said finally, and her voice cracked on the word back. "I swear to God, Rachel, I was going to pay her back. I didn't know she took it out of the house. I thought it was savings. I never would have let her mortgage the house I didn't know. And the terrible thing is that I believed her. That is the part I had not prepared for on the drive over. I had been ready for a Diane who knew, a Diane I could be angry at cleanly, and instead I got a sister who had taken our mother's help the way she had taken it her whole life, without ever turning over the rock to see what was underneath it, because no one had ever made her. She had not stolen the house out from under me. She had simply, one more time, allowed herself to be rescued and let our mother pay the price in a cold front room, and never once thought to ask what the rescue had cost. "You are going to sell it," I said. It was not a question. She looked at the realtor's card on the counter like it had appeared there by magic, and she did not deny it. "I have debts, Rachel. You don't know what the last few years have been like." "No," I said. "I don't. Because you never told me either. Nobody in this family ever tells me anything until it's in a box with my name on it." That landed harder than I meant it to, and I saw it land, and for once I did not rush to smooth it over. I had spent my entire life smoothing things over in that house. I was so tired of it that I could have laid down on the kitchen floor. Diane started to cry then, really cry, the kind that has no performance left in it, and I stood there, and I did not comfort her, and I did not attack her either. I just let the truth sit in the room between us, the way our mother had let so many truths sit unspoken in this exact kitchen for 50 years. The difference was that this one was finally out, where both of us could see it. "What did she leave you?" Diane asked, wiping her face with the back of her hand, and there was something new in how she asked it, something almost afraid of the answer. "In the box. What was it really?" And I realized, standing there, that I did not know. Not entirely, because there was still one envelope I had not opened, sitting at home at the bottom of that box next to a blue passbook with my name inside it, and I had driven all the way across town to tell my sister a truth without first learning the last of my own. "I don't know yet," I told her, honestly, "but I'm going home to find out." I left the papers on the counter for her to keep. She was going to need them more than I did, and I drove back across Portland with my hands steady on the wheel for the first time in 3 days toward a small sealed envelope that my mother had trusted me to open when I was ready. I think I was finally ready. The house was cold when I got back, and I did not stop to warm it. I sat down at the same table, in front of the same box, and I opened the blue passbook first, because a part of me was still afraid of the envelope, and the passbook felt like the smaller door. It was not the smaller door. The account had been opened the year I turned 21. 3 decades of entries filled it, page after page in the faded blue-black of a bank stamp, and the deposits were small, the kind of amounts a woman on a fixed income could hide from herself in the grocery money. $10, 15, once, 25. What stopped my breath was not the total at the bottom, which was modest, a few $1,000s, enough to matter and not enough to change a life. It was the dates. I knew the dates. I did not have to guess at them. There was a deposit the week I graduated that no one had come to. There was one the month my marriage ended, when I told the family I was fine and drove home alone. There was one dated the day after the furnace died, the night I came at 11 with the space heaters, and I sat there and I understood that while I was carrying those little heaters up her porch steps in the dark, my mother had gone the next morning and quietly put $10 into an account with my name on it, because it was the only way she had of saying a thing she could not say. She had been keeping a record, not of money, of me. Every deposit was a small dated proof that on that day, in that week, in the middle of a life where I was supposed to need nothing and ask for nothing, my mother had seen exactly what I was carrying and had found the one language she had left to answer it. I was crying before I ever opened the envelope, and when I finally did, the letter inside was the shortest of the 3. A single page, half filled. Her hand had grown shakier by the time she wrote it, and I think it was the last of the 3 she wrote. Maybe the last thing she wrote at all. "Rachel," it said, "by now you know about the house, and you know about your sister, and you know I chose her one more time, and I need you to hear why, from me, before you decide what kind of mother I was. I gave Diane the house because Diane has spent her whole life believing that things are given to her, and I could not leave this world letting her believe that one more time without the truth folded inside it. She will have to learn what that house really costs. It is the last lesson I have to teach her, and I am sorry it is a hard one. And I am sorry you had to be the one to carry it to her, because I know you, and I know you carried it gently. I gave you the box because you are the only one who was ever going to understand that it was the larger share. Everything true about this family is in your hands now. The letters, the proof, the memory of who actually showed up. I could not put the truth in the will because a will is a public thing and the truth would have shamed your sister in front of strangers, and I did not raise you to win that way, and you never once tried to. So I put it in a box that looked like nothing, and I trusted you to know that nothing was everything. I did one more thing, and I will tell you plainly so. There are no more secrets between us. The little policy from the church group, the one your father set up, names you. It is not much, but it is clean, and it is yours. And no bank in Boston or anywhere else has any claim on a single dollar of it. I wanted you to have one thing in your life that came to you without a catch and without a cost to anybody. You have earned that 1,000 times over, and I never once told you. I am telling you now. You were not the daughter I loved less, Rachel. You were the daughter I trusted more. I know those are not the same thing, and I know which one a child would rather hear. And I know I gave you the wrong one your whole life. This is me, too late, giving you the right one. The house was never the inheritance. You were the inheritance. You were the part of me worth passing on. I do not remember how long I sat at that table. The rain had stopped at some point without my noticing, and the streetlight outside the window had come on, and the box was empty now. Everything laid out around it. The letters and the photograph, and the blue passbook, and the papers I had already given away. 51 years I had spent holding a clean, dry spoon and being gracious about it, believing that the way to be loved in my family was to need nothing at all. And here, at the very bottom of a box, my sister had watched me carry out of a lawyer's office with pity in her eyes. My mother had finally, in her own shaking hand, in the only order she could manage, told me the one thing I had waited my entire life to hear. I was seen. I had always been seen. I put my hand flat on the letter the way she used to fold her hand over mine when I was frightened, and for the first time in 3 days, in the cold quiet of that house, I stopped biting the skin along the side of my thumb, and I let myself be still. Diane called me 3 weeks later on a Sunday and asked if I would come help her empty the house before the sale. I almost said no. Then I heard something in her voice I had waited my whole life to hear, which was that she did not expect me to say yes, and I understood that this too was new for both of us. We spent the afternoon in the house on Cushman Street with the rooms gone bare and echoing, wrapping our mother's plain dishes in newspaper, sorting scarves into piles the way Diane had started 2 weeks before, except this time, slowly and together. We did not have a big conversation. There was no scene where we fell into each other's arms and forgave everything, because we are not those kind of sisters, and our mother did not raise us to fix in one afternoon what 50 years had built. But somewhere in the middle of it, Diane handed me our mother's old recipe box, the tin one with the lemon cake card on top, and she said, "You should have this. You're the one who was here." And it was the closest thing to an apology either of us knew how to make. I took it. It was enough. Some peace is quiet and a little awkward and real, and I have come to believe that is the only kind that lasts. Diane kept the papers I left her, and she is dealing with the house the honest way now, the hard way, which is its own kind of growing up at 53. She will be all right. I find, to my own surprise, that I want her to be. I kept the letters and the photograph of 2 little girls on the church steps, and the blue passbook with 30 years of small dated proofs that I was seen the whole time I believed I was invisible. That is what I carried out of my mother's life. Not the house, the truth of it. And I have come to think my mother was right, that it was the larger share, because a house can be sold and a debt can be paid, and a truth like that one you get to keep until the day you hand it to somebody else. So let me say this to you, whoever you are, listening this far. If you have ever been the one who stayed, the one who showed up on the cold nights and asked for nothing and told everyone you were fine, I need you to hear the thing it took me 51 years and a dusty box to learn. Being the one who needed nothing was never the same as being the one who was loved less. Sometimes it means you were the one somebody trusted most and just never found the words to tell you. If that is you, I hope your words come sooner than mine did. I hope you do not have to wait for a box. My mother's name was Eleanor Collins, and she loved us both in the clumsy, unequal, entirely human way that most people love, and I have finally forgiven her for it, which I think is all she was ever really asking. There was one more thing in that recipe tin, tucked behind the lemon cake card, that I did not notice until I got it home. A second name I did not recognize, and a date from before either of us was born in my mother's hand. And I am starting to think the story I told you tonight was only the part of her life she let us see.